Okay, so we're the last panel of the show, so thank you all for coming along. I'm sure you've all had a busy con. This is Gastronomically Geeky. I'm Darren, I'm going to be moderating the panel, but you didn't come here to see me, you came to see these fine folks. So we had to make a few changes. Victoria and Alison were otherwise engaged, they couldn't make it, but we brought along another couple of experts who are going to compliment you. So let me introduce the crew to you. On the end, we have the wonderful Vanessa Lopez from Insight Editions. Now, Vanessa leads the acquisition, a lot of the creative design on a whole bunch of the cookbooks that you're seeing laid out on the table here. In the middle, we have the wonderful Robbie Schmidt. She's a publishing industry veteran. She's been doing this for a great many years. She knows everything there is to know about everything, pretty much. She works with Weldon Owen, and they do a range of licensed cookbooks as well, including the official Downton Abbey cookbook, the official Downton Abbey cocktail book, as well as a whole bunch of American Girl baking books. So she knows her stuff. And then last, but by no means least, we have the spectacularly talented Chelsea Monroe-Cassel. Chelsea and us have been working for many years. She did our Elder Scrolls cookbook, our World of Warcraft cookbook, and if you look closely on the cards that were just so wonderfully distributed by our volunteers, she is leading the charge on the official Galaxy's Edge cookbook, which will be coming out in November. So, ladies and gentlemen, your panel. So we'll kick off. I'm going to pose a few questions to the guys, and then a little bit later on, we will get to a Q&A. Please do participate. We have a bag full of things that we'll be tempting you up with. But to begin, I'm going to ask each of the panelists in turn. Cookbooks are having a moment, and licensed cookbooks certainly are having a moment. Vanessa, if you'd like to start, why do you think that fans are responding so well to licensed cookbooks?
Does that work? Yeah, good. I think that, well, for me, it's that I think food is just something that unites people. It's a shared experience. So anytime that you can get around and share food with people, you're sharing that moment. So if you can do that and simultaneously share your fandom, it's just a win-win. You know, it just brings you deeper into the world because everyone has to eat. Many of these characters have to eat. So it's cool to think, I spend hours gathering sweet rolls. It's cool to be able to create that and actually bring that into your real life. It's like bringing a piece of the fictional world into your everyday life. That's my feeling, anyway.
Robbie, what are your thoughts? Why do you think fans are going crazy for these cookbooks?
Well, they're just so passionate about the world. The first one we did with Chelsea was World of Warcraft cookbook. There's so much food in the game. The fans are such diehard fans of not just that one, but to agree with Vanessa, it kind of takes you into the world a little bit. But fans are fans of everything of the world, of their, in world. So I don't think that you can come up with something so obscure in their world and not get their attention. Yeah.
Cool. And Chelsea, as our resident expert, why do you think that fans love buying these cookbooks?
I think that it's in large part just a new way to engage with your favorite fandom. And for many people who are not adventurous bakers or maybe don't like spending a lot of time in the kitchen, it's a very familiar way to approach what can otherwise be a little bit scary, It's like, how do I make a really cool dinner? It's like, well, maybe we just don't. But if it's like, well, how do I make a dish from Skyrim or from the Serenity or, from any number of other worlds that you really want to spend time in, I think that it makes it a little bit more familiar and less scary to tackle.
I think also it's just fun too. Like we have a TMNT pizza cookbook, and it's like, some of it might just be a pepperoni pizza, but to think it's like Michelangelo's take on a pepperoni pizza, it makes it more than just pepperoni pizza. If that makes sense, I don't know. Seems to me it's just fun. Yeah. So.
Well, Chelsea, another question for you. You've been doing this for a long time. You've got one of the coolest jobs, I guess, in the con. Why do you write cookbooks? Where did you start?
So I blame this on reading Redwall as a child, which some of you clearly also have. That is a slippery food slope. So even though I was a picky eater and did not actually like food as a child, reading those descriptions in Redwall, it was just, it's worse than George Martin for like calibration's sake. It's such absolutely lush descriptions of food and cordials and desserts and everything swimming in cream, and it's just like, oh my goodness. So I think that's where I sort of got this bug, right? And I thought, what would some of those taste like? And then for me, it was really, as an adult, it was Game of Thrones, A Song of Ice and Fire, and just really, pardon the pun, sinking my teeth into the food of that world. And it was sort of before the show, so there weren't that many recipes online anywhere for like lemon cakes or, beef and bacon pie. So I thought, well, if I want to make it, other people might want to make it too. So here we are. So didn't see that one coming, but glad you're all here.
Robbie, what do you think makes for a really good fan-based cookbook? There are a lot of them out there. There are a lot of cookbooks in the world. Some good, some great, some not so good. What do you think is the secret sauce of a great cookbook?
I think it's the element of surprise in these certain categories that we've been successful in approaching. For instance, again with World of Warcraft, we were at Blizzard together doing an event, and never have I seen so many young guy gamers like in line to get a cookbook. It's like, okay. And then they come back next year and they say, hey, I made the Thanksgiving dinner, or, they actually use the cookbook and they think it's really a fun thing to do. So I think, just the viralness of guys getting into it, girls getting into it, but primarily a lot of the guys were getting into it. And so, I just really think that they're having fun with it.
Cool. Vanessa, you're involved on the acquisition side, so often you're there before these projects even kick off. Mm-hmm. So, where the hell does an Elder Scrolls cookbook come from? Talk to us about the process.
We have very silly meetings. They're really fun. There are snacks. But yeah, no, honestly, no, we have a great team, great editorial team. There's a lot of wonderful debate, spirited discussion, and the best part about it is, no idea is too crazy. And yeah, just to Robbie's point, I think when we decided wanted to do the World of Warcraft cookbook, there was a lot of like, well, are gamers really gonna, is this a target audience for cookbooks? Are they gonna, really want this? And we're like, no, trust us. It's coming up with the concept and then having the conviction to say, no, this is, you trust us, fans are gonna really love this. And, because it's something that we want to see exist in the world. So, we put everything into it, into making it an authentic experience. Yeah, does that answer the question?
Well, let's do a little focus group. Who in this room has one of these cookbooks? Hands up. Oh, come on. There must be more of you than that.
Good number.
How many of you have used
any of these
it?
ones? Or even any of Chelsea's cookbooks. She's done a great many. That's more like it. Now, hands down, how many of you actually have made a recipe from Chelsea's cookbook?
That's a good number.
No, you're not doing it. We'll get back to this later. Chelsea, so you've worked on many, many books. How do you feel if you're working on one where you weren't necessarily a fan of the property in the beginning? What's your process? How do you get to learn a world that you're not that familiar with?
Sure. So ideally, I have about 3 to 4 months total time to work or more. 6 is awesome, especially if I'm not super familiar with the IP. And I always start with a ridiculously deep dive into the lore, because I can never be as big a fan of any of these fandoms as the super fans. but they'll know if I don't get it right. And it's a disservice to the fans, I think, to really not put the time in, you know? So for something like Elder Scrolls, you know, bonus points, it is a lot of spending time in the game. And it's, for something like Warcraft, I'm like the idiot spinning in circles on a table, trying to get a screenshot of a bowl of fruit so that I can incorporate that into a photo at some point, right? So that was me. Wave if you see me next time. But it's really fun. It's a lot of work. An enormous amount of research goes into it, both visually in terms of the lore, and just coming up with what goes in, which is different for every single project. You know, something like World of Warcraft, every single dish is a dish in the game, right? And so some of those have ingredients, you can craft them in the game. So I take that into consideration. The ingredients have to match. I'm a stickler. It makes me crazy sometimes. It makes my job a lot harder sometimes. But it has to be right. And something like Warcraft, you know, you've got the little in-game images. So if you have that, why not make it match if you can? Something like Elder Scrolls is a mixture of in-game foods and sort of extrapolated out from, okay, so you kicked open a barrel and there are a bunch of potatoes. What can you do with it, you know? And so it's kind of neat that every single project is a different approach, a different combination of skills and imagery and just everything in between.
Robbie, a question for you. Often we'll have folks come to us for ideas of cookbooks, and we get lots of requests. Tell us about times where you've had to go to somebody who's a rights holder and you've tried to charm them, and what the tricks are to get them to agree to us to make one of our crazy cookbooks.
Well, AMC was very, very stickler about the cookbook we would do for them. They didn't want it to be a funny project. They wanted it to be a serious cookbook, not just like, Walking Dead for the Walking Dead cookbook. They didn't want it to be like gore and, you know, I mean, we do have an element of illustrations in there that are gory, but they really wanted it to be a real cookbook. And a lot of the studios, they just, based on the quality of projects we do, they want us to stay on par with what we put out. And so the quality of the book, the approach in making it a usable, functional cookbook, AMC in particular was a little more challenging to convince for the Walking Dead cookbook because they couldn't envision it until we came up with some concepts for them to buy into the idea. So, and you know, the Turtles book was fun.
Yeah. Vanessa, it looked like you had a comment there.
No, I'm also thinking about that because I think for them it was staying super true to the brand because it's it's serious and what that would be and making sure and protecting that, and I think that's that's the way to do it. So that cookbook for us was, there are some recipes in the show, but and they're in the book, but also what would you eat? What would you do if you were in this world and it was a zombie apocalypse, and how do you survive? So, I mean, that book teaches you how to forage, hunt, skin, preserve and can and all of that kind of stuff, because that's, a lot of what you would probably do. So that's and that's really what resonates with people. It brings you into the world, but it's also really useful.
Yeah, and so with our partners, it's just important to make it true to the brand.
Chelsea, you hit upon a subject earlier about honoring the fan and making sure that the books and the recipes, they're both faithful and they're high quality. But we don't always get it right, so tell us about any irate fan encounters you may have had on recipes or books that you may have been involved with.
I actually can't name any. So, sorry about that.
Oh, you're being too much.
So if you're like, don't break my record. If anybody's mad at me, just like.
100% of the time, she's right 100% of the time. Well, changing or pivoting a little bit there, so why don't you tell us about some of your favorite recipes? What are the ones either you're most proud of, or was the most challenging, or the one you just high-five yourself over?
I always have a handful of favorites from each project. I'm not going to be able to come up with all of them. I've got them listed on my blog if you like really have to know. Whenever I'm putting together the cookbooks, though, one of my like personal failings is I always start with the drinks and the desserts because those are my favorites. Which means, you're getting down to the 11th hour towards the deadline and it's nothing but side dishes left. And you're just like, God, the green beans. I just want the cookies back. I'm trying to be better about that, but that's my own like personal goal. Recent favorites are... there's a Chinese 5-spice caramel in the Firefly cookbook. There's an eggnog recipe in the World of Warcraft cookbook. Also the Elder Scrolls cookbook. They're different recipes, but they're both, they make an appearance at Christmas time, which a very long Christmas season with a lot of eggnog. But the desserts, I really like the root cake in the Elder Scrolls cookbook. Spiced root cake. That one's pretty good. Parsnips are underrated, so.
And what about recipes that for any number of reasons wouldn't have made it into the book? Are there some in the Lost Archive that you bemoan the fact you couldn't get into one of the cookbooks?
Yeah, there are always recipes that either don't make the cut because I couldn't make them work or I couldn't get them right enough, to match whatever the original was, whether it's in a game or a book or what have you. If I can't get it right by the time that deadline rolls along, doesn't make the cut generally. There are some, especially Warcraft, because you've got some really funky recipe ingredients going on. The one that always sticks out to me is there was a stew that I really wanted to put in the Warcraft cookbook because the little image is like, it's served in a little miniature pumpkin, it's super cute. I thought that'll be so much fun to photograph, but it includes crocolisk meat and salmon. And I thought, crocolisk, all right, it's gonna be alligator maybe is the closest, and salmon and pumpkin. And I dutifully tried to make something along those lines work, and I could not do it. So someday I'll photograph something in a pumpkin, but it's not going to be that.
Robbie, you're working with Weldon Owen on a couple of more genteel books, shall we say? We have the Downton Abbey cookbook and the Downton Abbey cocktail book. So obviously a little bit different than these fantasy books because the drinks and the food exist. So firstly, tell me what your favorite cocktail from the cocktail book is, if you can narrow it down to your favorite 10.
Well, I guess gin and tonic because that's what they drink,
But seriously,
there's no bad drink in the book.
Well, that's the right answer, of course. There is no bad drink, folks.
Yeah, there's no bad drink.
What key differences do you see then? Because obviously you worked with Blizzard in the early days of Insight and some of these gaming cookbooks, but Downton's different because it's real world. So what different approaches do you take when it's a real world, or at least a grounded real world, relatively speaking? It's based in or on planet Earth.
Well, it feels a bit surreal, just because of the era, and it's really personal to some people because it is a real world and it is a real time, and so I think it's not as much of a straight off cookbook as it is like an entertaining experience, because it was a time where people had this certain linen and these beautiful china plates, and so it's really more of a lifestyle kind of a cookbook and drink book. Yeah.
And as we're talking about lifestyle, some of you would be lucky enough to have been given some of the cards that we have. We have Entertaining with Disney, which is a little bit of a diversion for us at Insight, and Vanessa can speak to this in a moment. It's both a recipe book, but there's also an element of crafting and hosting. So talk us through Entertaining with Disney. It's in the vein of what we do, but we've shifted a little bit to make it a little less purely food-based.
Yeah, it's like a cookbook plus for Disney fans because we thought, why stop with the food? Why not just create an entire experience and show people how to, if you want to create an Alice in Wonderland tea party, here's super immersive food and also decor and fun activities and fun games and ideas for kind of pulling it all together and bringing your family together. So I think there's a Lion King baby shower. Which, and, just all kinds of really fun villains, Halloween party with all kinds of, fun food ideas, but also just craft, costumes, just, totally immersive Disney experience. So it's really fun.
Yeah, and we also we haven't gotten our super geeky roots. We have an Overwatch cookbook coming out later this year with our friends at Blizzard. So how did that come about? Did they ask us? Did we ask them? Or did we meet in the middle?
Well, we did the World of Warcraft cookbook, and then we were like, okay, well, now we want to do one for all of them. And so it has been super fun. And actually, Chelsea is the author of the Overwatch cookbook as well. So it's a true Insight and Chelsea collaboration across Blizzard properties, which is really fun. And hopefully at some point we'll be able to release the set of, World of Warcraft, Overwatch, Hearthstone, and Diablo. I think Diablo is the last one we have left. So, yeah. Plus, sorry, go.
No, you go ahead. You're
no,
more
I mean,
interesting than I am.
Last thing is that Overwatch is just super fun because there's so many nationalities represented. You can speak to this too, Chelsea. I think for us that was super fun to be able to show so many different diverse cuisines through this fictional world was pretty fun.
Yeah, I wanted to touch on that because Overwatch, for those of you who don't know, it's not an especially story-rich game. So we put Chelsea in the weird position of having to create lore, create story and characterizations where they're not necessarily in the game. So talk to us about how you got your thinking cap on and solved the relative lack of storyline in terms of making recipes for Overwatch.
Sure. So again, deep dive. I already played the game, thankfully, so that was a good start. But it also is watching all of the little character clips, the backstories, the origin stories, the comics when they exist. I got so excited while I was working on this, unreasonably, whenever they released some new little snippet, and I could be like, is there anything I can use in this?
Yeah.
Like many of you, I'm sure. But it's neat because again, every project's different. So this one is all character-based. So it's the favorite foods, theoretically, of all of the characters in Overwatch. And so it's drinks and desserts and, what do you eat if you're getting ready for a match? What do you eat if you lost to feel better? What's your comfort food if you're Reinhardt, what is Mercy's drink of choice? Things like that. So it was really fun to put together. And a challenge because it's really diverse international cuisines, many of which I'm not familiar with. So Google Foo did not let me down. And then when I could call on friends to be like, do you have any ideas? Am I doing it right? It was super helpful. But I think it'll be pretty cool in the end. So.
Yeah.
I know when we announced the book, there was a lot of excitement from the Overwatch crowd because Blizzard doesn't really dole out the lore behind these characters that often. So when we announced the book, there was this big rejoicing, and they said, at long last, we're learning something about Overwatch. We just didn't expect to learn it in a cookbook. So that was nice. For all three of you, go into a bit of a quick fire round. Most inspirational real world or fictional chef?
Oh my gosh.
Hot pie.
I don't want to, you go.
What was the
I had to
question?
think.
Your most inspirational real world or fictional chef?
Oh God, that's tough.
Well, to be honest, I turned vegan about 5.5 years ago, and I was inspired by this beautiful yogi woman and her ultra Ironman athlete husband, and I thought, I want to be like them. So I guess I would pick them because they really changed my life. So,
Vanessa, did we give you enough time to think of one?
Honestly, so I'm a huge nerd for the Great British Bake Off. I love that show. It's actually like I've seen every season more than once. But I think it's a toss up between Mary Berry. I love Mary Berry and all of the contestants. I really fall in love with all of them. So I don't know. I love that show.
Very
Everyone on Great British Bake Off is my answer.
You're making me feel very homesick for my husband. Chelsea, I want to take a little bit of time because, again, we did distribute some cards. We have, later this year, we're very excited about this one. This is, for those who don't have a card, this is the official cookbook from Black Spire at Galaxy's Edge Parks down in Disney. We've been working with Disney for a great many times, and we're very excited about this book. So Chelsea was in the envious position of working with the Disney folks, but she was also given a lot of leeway. We only have 9 recipes from the park within the book. I think about 9, maybe 10. So Chelsea then had to get the thinking cap back on. So in a book of over 50, 60 recipes, there was plenty of opportunity for her to flex her creative muscles. So talk to us about working on the motherlode of them all. You are writing a Star Wars cookbook. How cool is that?
Pretty cool. That one was on my bucket list for sure. So to get to be able to do Elder Scrolls and then also Star Wars is like, where do you even go next? If you have suggestions, I'm willing to hear them, incidentally. But so I actually had a list of ideas for various Star Wars foods that I've been building over the years because there isn't or has not been until now an in-world Star Wars cookbook, and that does not seem right. I have a lot of different reference sheets and ideas at home, but this was one that I've been working on for a while. It was a whirlwind project, so I didn't get to go quite as weird as I might have otherwise gone. I wanted to get a little molecular gastronomy in there and like really some funky science food. But you're gonna have to check the blog for that one because didn't quite get it in there. But I pulled from a lot of different sources for inspiration. A big one that I really loved was, I don't know if you're familiar with the Dex's Diner sort of fake menu that went up on StarWars.com many years ago. But it's a very funny read through. It's like if you go to a standard like chrome-sided diner anywhere, but it's all Star Wars. And so some of the dishes came from that, like Kowakian crumb cake, which is, Salacious Crumb's dessert of choice, It's, so there's some punny stuff in there. But I also, whenever there were fan favorites, like you've got to have like a classic Mandalorian dish. You've got to have something for the Hutts, And so that's the one that's actually on the recipe card. It's kind of dodgy looking, but it's really delicious.
Actually, yes. Talk to us about Hutty's slime pods. They sound delicious.
Sure. Don't they, though? So they're these delightfully gooey, slimy, green gnocchi. But it's an avocado pesto, basically. Very flavorful, very delicious. You can add a little paprika or sriracha on top, depending on your spice preference.
That sounds great.
It tastes twice as delicious if you eat it with a spork. Fun fact. So.
And as I understand it, when you were coming up with recipes, you looked to the planets and the environments for some kind of inspiration. Can you talk about how the planets of Star Wars got the brain ticking over?
Absolutely. And that also, it played into shooting the photos for a lot of these dishes because, it's not going to be complete in my mind if you don't have sort of a sandy planet thing, whatever your feelings on sand are.
We hate it.
Pro
Gets
or
everywhere.
con. But you also need like some swampy kind of atmospheres. Maybe you need some forest atmospheres. You need some cantina atmospheres for sure. And so with any cookbook I work on, I always sort of halfway or 3/4 of the way through, I take a hard look at everything that I've got so far and see where it needs to be balanced. Do I have too many drinks? Do I have too much from Dagobah? It just weird questions, and make sure that there's something for everybody dietarily, and that I haven't gone overboard with the desserts, which is always a risk. So.
Okay, I'm going to leave with 2 quick-fire round questions before we get you guys involved. So we'll start with hopefully a simpler one, and this is for all 3 of you. Across all the cookbooks that you've worked on, you've obviously gained a lot of experience, but what is the white whale? What is the licensed cookbook that you would love to see made?
I think it was Star Wars, so I'm not sure what the next one is.
That I would love to see made. Oh man. Well, the first one was Adventure Time. Actually, it was a huge Adventure Time, so I definitely wanted to see that made. And it was actually kind of a dream come true. It was so much fun to do. But I think if this is going to sound super random, but I'm a huge Buffy fan. And so I would love to see a Buffy cookbook, and I don't even know what they eat. I know I know some things that they eat, but I don't know. I just like food from the Bronze, if there is food from. I don't know. I would just like to see this made, because I want to own one.
Robbie, what are you hoping for?
Gosh, we just did a Corleone cookbook for The Godfather, and that was a fun project. And I just, I don't know any shows now that are all vegan, so it's kind of hard for me to know.
Probably find some on PBS, I'm sure.
I don't know.
Avatar, maybe?
I was pitched by the deadliest cat chef who wanted to do a book on fish preparation, and
Risking their life for
those
dinner.
kinds of things that sometimes we have to turn away. The turtle cookbook was really fun. 2 cons ago, we had Kevin Eastman in our booth signing, and we created a pizza box for the book to sit in. And then I found a restaurant down on the gas lamp to cook recipes from the book. And the first 50 people to get in line and buy the book got the pizza box and got a ticket to come to the pizza party with them. So, I don't know, it's a little off skew from the question, but I think any of the, and going back to the fan base and what makes it work, it's just making it fun, and the creators really love it because it's not an art. A lot of art books come out, a lot of different size, different style art books and different things, but it's really, it's fun for them, for their, creations to take it on a different format in terms of cooking.
Anytime you can
So any of them, I think any fan base would be. I mean, you guys could probably throw out a lot of different things that you would like to see come out in a cookbook.
Yeah, I'd love to hear that.
Friends. I was thinking Friends.
man.
That would be really fun.
That would be great.
Hey, who wants to back me on a Ron Swanson cookbook?
Oh my God.
There we go.
I'm all
You
about
heard them,
the
Vanessa.
bacon.
The people have
Oh, yeah.
spoken.
A Good Place cookbook would be so good. Oh my God.
Okay.
All
we-
frozen
Yeah,
yogurt, though, isn't it?
you can
So-
use the word fork as a pun in a title really well in that one too. Yeah, that would be great.
Okay, well, I think now that we've got you guys started to warm up, we're going to offer some free swag to those of you brave enough and throw a question at our panelists. So come on now, don't be shy. Oh my God, have we got enough swag?
Hello, hello. Hey!
Go shoot.
Hey.
Perfect. So you guys are super creative with your ideas and that you guys have. Has there been any intellectual properties that you're just like, no matter how we phrase it or turn it, you just can't make it work? Like if it was like StarCraft, you're like, what are they supposed to do? Is just have like energy cubes? What? Or anything like that that you just weren't able to make work?
Did it make it
For
work?
all of you guys.
I'm drawing a little bit of a blank about Diablo, to be honest. I'm a little worried about that one.
Just spicy. They can
I know.
a lot of chilies. I don't think so. I mean, I think that part of the fun is the challenge of like making stuff that doesn't exist in the real world, and making it real somehow. I'm sure at some point we will be stumped, but so far so good.
It always helps when there is some relation to food in the game,
Yeah,
or even for Overwatch, despite many objections over not enough lore, there's enough lore, so you've got something to work with. So.
Coming up, I will swag you up.
Woohoo.
Next question, please.
Hi, my partner and I just finished writing a Little Women cookbook.
Oh, cool.
And one of the
Nice.
things that we ran into was, what do you do when there's an iconic dish or food in your property that actually doesn't really taste very good or doesn't fit modern tastes? Where are you on the scale of tasting good versus accurate?
Oh, that's a good question, because that's one of my personal soapboxes. I love historical recipes, and I think that they often get undersold because if they're not made well, they don't taste good, right? And so you can be like, well, obviously all medieval food is gross, and we all know that they used a lot of spices because all the meat was spoiled. It's not true. They would have suffered from food poisoning just like the rest of us, no matter how much spice you put on that. So let me just clear that up right now. But I think that, especially when dealing with historical recipes, you look at the original, and then you think, if this doesn't taste good, I bet it doesn't taste right. And there's always a little bit of an element of, have tastes just changed? A medieval meat dish is probably going to be much more sweet and savory together than a modern meat dish will be, at least in Western cuisine. But it always has to taste good before it goes into a cookbook. So it's you start with what you've got, and then, if necessary, embellish a little bit. But
Come on up. We have got way more questions than swag, but don't worry, if you come by the Insight Editions booth, we'll sort you out.
We could come by the booth.
Yeah, for sure.
I love the red wall shout out. That was one of my inspirations.
Right.
So good, those honey cakes. So I guess jumping off the last question, you have the Elder Scrolls book, you have medieval recipes. So where do you kind of start? Do you do a lot of culinary research when you know, okay, I'm jumping into high fantasy land and,
Sure.
God knows what that looks like. So where do you kind of start with that?
Right. So an enormous number of medieval cookbooks have been digitized, which both makes them very easy to search if they've been sort of transliterated. If it's just the page scan and you've got all the S's that look like F's, not good for searching with the search function. You got a page at a time. But I try to find something like, if I'm filling in, so for the Elder Scrolls cookbook, there's a lot of Skyrim-inspired foods in there. So it's got to be sort of Scandinavian feeling, sort of stick-to-your-ribs kind of food, and stuff that would help keep you alive and warm in that kind of a climate. And so I always take, climate and trade and everything else bonkers into consideration when trying to develop what the recipe list is going to look like. Specifically with historical foods, you can kind of roughly match, is it more of a ancient Roman culture, or is it more, 14th century high chivalry, English, and there's generally a cookbook to kind of roughly use for those various quasi-time periods.
Thank you. Next question.
My question was actually very similar. So instead, for the Star Wars cookbook, did you look at any of our cultures here to get inspiration from it, because it is fantasy and in space? So
I definitely, both for that and for the Firefly cookbook, I researched what you can eat in space and what the future of food might look like. And So it's like, all right, so algae is a superfood that we could probably grow in vats. So let's put some spirulina in some stuff, right? Or I didn't go full out. Like, honestly, one of the foods of the future is like bugs. There are no bugs in the cookbooks, but I just want you all to know that I did that for all of you. There are no bugs, but there would be in space, almost certainly. So I think they have them in Snowpiercer. At least the film, right? There's that big vat of crickets. Future food, people.
Yeah.
Really? Oh, I missed that. I totally would have gone for that.
Okay, I think we have about 5 minutes left, but we'll have a little surprise at the end for you guys. So let's keep going. We've got a few more questions.
Okay. Okay, so thank you for the cookbooks. I'm a horrible cook. My boyfriend cooks the World of Warcraft for the Alliance.
The world needs eaters too.
Just kind of curious, have you guys ever considered doing like international properties, like any particular K-drama theme ones?
Ooh.
Oh, yeah.
Haven't yet, but now we will.
Some like anime
Yeah.
cookbooks based on anime could be interesting.
Well, I did think of the Crazy Rich Asian cookbook.
When you are creating the recipes for some of your books, do you find yourself drawn more to certain cultures, ethnicity, food, like traditional food, spices, and things like that? Or
I have an absolutely out of control spice cabinet at home because when I started doing medieval cooking, I didn't have anything weird. And so I got into this sort of compulsive habit of if I ever saw a spice or a seasoning that I didn't have, I would buy it because I might need it. You can imagine how well that goes after many years of doing this. I think I need about 2 cabinets worth of just, and you gotta like open it and like put your hand up there. It's bad. But I think that that's one of the really fun and very adventurous parts of cooking, or can be, is discovering new flavors and trying new spices. And while I always try to keep all the ingredients as approachable as possible, like I live in the middle of nowhere in Vermont, so if I can't find an ingredient, I can't find that ingredient. Like there's nowhere to go. And so if you can't order it online, it doesn't make the cut, you know? Because it should be an adventure in the fun sense, not like a have to travel to Mount Doom adventure. You shouldn't need to do that for food, unless you want to, like, in which case, good on you. Go get your lembas. But it should be approachable as possible for everybody, but still be interesting.
Very good, thank you. Before you start, we have 5 minutes left. I doubt we're going to get through all the questions, but it doesn't matter. If after we've wrapped up, if you go to the Insight Editions booth, which is
3721.
3721, thank you, my use the secret password, Darren says hi, and the guys there will give you a free piece of swag. Okay, so let the questions commence. We've got a few minutes to go.
So I saw you guys have the WB cookbook, and I'm a big wrestling fan, but it's not a fandom known for culinary design or thoughts. So there's no like background lore in some way for like Overwatch was. So what was the process for creating a cookbook for something that has zero connection to food whatsoever, basically?
I think the WWE cookbook, it was probably just fun. It was like, how can we create the most fun food that's inspired by the wrestlers, like their personalities, because they have such colorful, like super fun, very specific personalities, or like it's something that they like, coupled with like things that WWE fans would like to make before WrestleMania or, tailgating or whatever the case may be. So it was like all of kind of those things combined. And anyway, we had a lot of fun naming the recipes in that book. So
I don't know. And Kofi Kingston was in our booth yesterday doing a signing, and it was a bit of madness. But his drink it's a coffee with Jamaican rum. So I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know if that was a before wrestling match kind of a thing.
Yeah, maybe not
but
before. Maybe
they're
after.
having fun with it too. Yeah, they're having a lot of fun with the book.
Yeah.
Hi, so you guys talked about how fun it is to have a huge diversity represented in Overwatch and how that gives you a lot of range to be able to choose some really fun things. So with that wide range, though, how did you guys decide to narrow it down, or what made you pick specific recipes over some others?
So the way I approached picking the recipes for Overwatch specifically is I had 4 categories. I wanted, an appetizer, a drink, maybe something sweet, and then a main course. And so no character has more than 4 dishes. Some of them have a couple fewer. But in many cases, it was sort of the most popular national dish, or if it's like for May, it's a lot of sort of street food, right, from the city where she's born, and things like that. So just pulling from whatever details we've got.
So for a show like Firefly that already has a lot of cultures like represented within it versus properties that don't, like within a video game where you have to create the culture, how do you find inspiration from like cuisine culture already to match recipes with?
Well, I think that when the original content creators are building out their worlds, they pull from different inspirations themselves. And so when possible, I try to match that. If I can figure it out, either on myself or, watching their podcasts or listening to their podcasts or watching their panels or whatever. You can find like a real world analog for Dorne, and sometimes it's a mashup, or for the Night's Watch in Westeros. But it's sort of tricky to try and find that as close a match as possible in real world. And sometimes they don't exist, and then you just kind of wing it.
I was wondering, when you're developing a new recipe, what your beta testing process is like. If it's just you, or do you have a lot of people tasting your food?
It's mostly just me, and with the desserts especially, because you sense a recurring theme here. I offload them to my mom's office because my mom lives up the road from me. So when she knows I'm working on a cookbook, she'll just stop at the house every morning on the way to work, pick up whatever it is that I made, and then I get the office review, which is pretty good. So I have an office of taste testers there. Because my parents are wonderful, but they're not reliable. They think everything I do is fantastic. And I'm just like, but I need a little more criticism. Like, does it need more salt? I don't know. So.
Hey. Kind of an odd question. If you were to take on Castlevania, would you attempt wall chicken?
Ooh. I'm not super familiar with Castlevania, but I like a challenge. So I'll check it out.
Okay, that was a fiendish question to end upon, sir. You should be ashamed of yourself. But I'm sorry we couldn't take any more questions. We're out of time. But before we say goodbye to the panelists, remember, go to the Insight Editions booth 3721. Tell them Darren says hi, and they will get you some stuff. But in the meantime, I would like to thank you all for coming, and of course thanking our panelists, Vanessa Lopez, Robbie Schmidt, and Chelsea Monroe-Cassel.